Here's what I heard. I heard truck owners laughing at their customers, brokers, and saying, oh, they offered me $3.80 a mile, and I just laughed at them and hung up. I'm just shocked at things like that. And that's the only number they seem to know.
Hey, Super Dispatch community, this is Bek Abdullayev with another episode of Auto Transport Copilot. Today on the podcast, we have Kevin Rutherford, and he's a longtime expert in the trucking industry. And I'm super excited to have him share some of his expertise, knowledge, and tips and tricks about the trucking space. Kevin also works with a lot of car hauling companies and has a lot of experience. So let me introduce Kevin. Our guest today is Kevin Rutherford, founder and CEO of Let's Truck, a platform dedicated to empowering truckers with the tools, knowledge, and strategies to succeed. Kevin is a well-respected leader in the trucking community, having hosted the Trucking Business and Beyond radio show for over 15 years, providing invaluable business advice to owner-operators and fleet owners. With a mission to help truckers increase fuel efficiency, reduce maintenance costs, and improve overall profitability, Kevin has become a trusted resource for both new and seasoned truckers alike. He's also the founder of the Audio Road Network, which includes his flagship program, Trucking Business and Beyond. And he's deeply committed to blending business success with personal well-being as a nutritional therapy practitioner at Destination Health. Kevin's unique approach focuses on real-world data and practical solutions that allow truckers to achieve sustainable business growth and a healthier lifestyle. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Well, great to be here. You know, I listened to that intro and I think, how many shows can you call and ask about your fuel injectors and your gallbladder on the same show?
Well, this one, it's a unique blend, something that we all deeply care about. So I'm really excited to have you on the show, Kevin. You bring a plethora of experience. You have a lot of experience working with trucking companies, owner-operators, fleets, as well as people in the auto transport space. But tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up being and working in the trucking industry in the first place.
Yeah, so it goes way back. I'm actually third generation. My grandfather was an owner-operator when, and this isn't a truck driver story, the seat in the truck was a wooden bench. He goes back to when diesels were first introduced into the industry, and it was actually leased to one of the moving companies, and you would measure a trip to the West Coast. I grew up in the Midwest, Ohio, and you would measure a trip to the West Coast in weeks, not days or hours. There were no truck stops, no interstates. It's amazing to me that they could even get a truck across the country back then. And my father started driving a milk truck when he was 14, obviously no license. And that was what he did his whole life. He drove truck. And it's somewhat of a sad story because my dad loved trucks and he loved equipment. He was one of the best, self-taught mechanics I've ever known. And I learned everything I know about mechanics from him. But because he had a 9th grade education and he didn't understand business, he would work at a union driving job that paid well, and he hated it. And he would save enough money to buy an old junk truck, and he would work on it till he could put it on the road, and he'd run it till he ran out of money, and then go back to a job he, hated. And watching that growing up, I thought, boy, that's just awful. Why would I ever want to do that? And by 22, I bought a truck and decided to do exactly that. And really, in some ways, followed in his footsteps. I just didn't know a whole lot about business. And I thought if I just work hard enough, I can make this succeed. And if I was running out of money, I would just go buy another truck. I figure if I'm not making enough money, I must need more trucks. And I got to 11 and couldn't find enough freight for them. So I got a broker's license, started looking for freight. And things just got worse. And I was really in debt and I couldn't see a way out. And I finally had to just sit down and I started reading because I've always been a big reader. So instead of reading novels, I started reading business books. And I realized all the mistakes I was making. And I had to make the really tough decision to sell 9 of the 11 trucks and get out of the office and back into the truck myself. And I really started studying financial planning and taxes, and I became a certified financial planner. And when I started doing accounting for my business, when I accounted for each truck and every expense and knew where the money was going, running the business became so much easier and profits started to climb. You know, if you measure something, you can improve something. And that was the whole focus. And I was surrounded by, you know, other owner operators. I grew up in a family. At one point, myself, 4 brothers, my father and 2 brother-in-laws all had trucks. Yeah, and I was doing accounting for them, and my friends all had trucks, so I started doing accounting for them and ultimately built a tax and accounting company. Over time, built 2 of them, sold them both, and then started the radio show. And all this time, throughout all that, I had trucks, and I maintained that fleet. And after starting the radio show in 2007, I kept the trucks till about 2010. And I had developed accounting software by then, and it became such a big business on its own that I sold my trucking company in 2012 and have been focused strictly on what we do now here at Let's Truck. So really, the best way I'd like to put it, we have so many resources to help truck owners. I just like to say that I help drivers and truck owners live their best life. And we do it through business, money, and health education and resources. And I do have a good car hauler story, if you want to hear that one. So I talked about growing up in this family, and I'm the youngest of 7. So I have 4 older brothers that were all driving. And one of my brothers had been working for Martin Brower, who had the McDonald's contract forever. So he delivered to all the McDonald's restaurants. Yeah, and there would be like leftover stuff that a restaurant might have refused or whatever. A lot of times it would be like the Big Mac buns. So, you know, I was excited about making Big Macs at home. And I got used to that. And he left that job and he went to a job hauling cars. So I immediately asked him, so are you going to be bringing me home Corvettes now? But that never really materialized. So it's been my whole life. You know, I feel like everything I have in life came through the trucking industry. It was how I was raised, provided food and shelter growing up. I met my wife, my current wife, through the trucking industry, and I've been in it my entire adult life. So I really, really feel like I owe a lot to the industry, and I try to give back as much as I can.
I love that mindset, Kevin. And first of all, congratulations on lots of incredible achievements and continuing to unlock the knowledge gaps and continuing to learn and grow and solve problems for the community. I love the mindset that you have around growing, and especially now that you've accumulated a lot of knowledge and have a lot of value to pass on to the trucking community, or the carrier community, that you're paying it forward. One of the reasons that I've been excited to have you on the show is precisely what you focus on, helping carriers create this business mindset, the financial mindset. Because when I was learning about the overall trucking space and logistics, and especially car hauling and auto transport, I didn't see any schools or materials or content that specializes on how to build and successfully run a car hauling business from a financial business perspective. Right? You can go to school for CDL, you can be an apprentice to learn how to, or you can work at a company to learn how to pick up and deliver cars, but no one is really teaching, and no one is really sharing either the knowledge that they've worked really hard to build up over the years. So this is an area that I want to start out with you. But before I ask you my first question, like, do you see that problem? Like, how big of a problem is that?
It's the biggest problem. And it's shocking to me that we have so many business owners in this industry, and we hardly use that term. You know, we might call them owner operators, we might call them independent contractors. We don't really use the word business owner much. Here's another word that is so absent from this industry: at this level. When my sweet spot really has always been and will always be one truck fleets. And now, the beauty is when I teach somebody how to run one truck really well, many of them will go on to buy more trucks. So now I have a lot of people who started with one or none. I help them buy their first truck many times. And now they are small fleet owners. So I still play a lot in that arena as well. But the business mindset is almost completely absent. And the customer service mindset is almost never talked about. Very seldom do you see truck owners use the word customer. And it's one of the few businesses where you don't have to sell or market. The work's just available. You just sign up for load board accounts or, call a broker and they say, here's work. How many businesses can you do that? Almost every other business, if you decide to open a business, you have to reach out to customers. You have to market to get people to know you exist. And then when they know you exist, you have to sell to them. And that alone puts you in a customer service mindset. But I think because we don't have to do that, doesn't mean you shouldn't, because we don't have to, we forget that there's a customer to serve. And when I bring this up to the people, many times they've been in the industry for decades. It's the first time anybody's even mentioned this concept to them. And believe it or not, sometimes they don't know who their customer is. They'll think maybe it's the shipper, the receiver. And one of the things I try to tell people is, look, this is really simple. In business, your customer is always the person that paid you. And then I get them to stop and think. If they're leased to a carrier, which is a common model in our industry, I ask them, who pays you? Well, the carrier does. Well, then they're your customer. And they get that kind of deer in the headlights look, and they have to think about it. And many times they're not really happy about it. If you listen to the way most leased on owner operators talk about their carrier, it's awful. It's more like an employee talking about a job that they don't like. They'll complain about the carrier. They're awful. They don't know how to schedule anything. They're always there. It's just horrible that when they stop and realize that's their customer, if I can get that point across to them, they're kind of shocked. And we know in this industry how small carriers tend to talk about brokers. They're all greedy. They don't do any of the work. They're at home with an internet connection and a phone. And why did they get so much of the profit? And it just goes on and on. I've heard them call them horrible names. And I'll stop and say, wait a minute, that's your customer. You are cashing their check to provide a service. And if that's the way you feel about them, then you should stop cashing their checks and you should go find better customers. And that mindset is so hard to get across. After I've been doing this for several decades now, and in our community, I refer to them as our tribe. They know that is my whole game. I mean, that's how I get people to make that shift and change the way they do business, is to get them to focus on what every other business has to focus on, which is the customer and providing value to them.
Yeah, I love that customer centricity. I want to ask you a question. I'm going to take the role of a small one truck operation or a small carrier business owner in this conversation. And let me ask you this. So why is it important to know your customer? And once I have identified who my customer is exactly as a business owner, what do I do with that information?
Okay, so you probably didn't know this, but I am going to give you the secret, the absolute secret to success in any business. And we can apply it to this one truck scenario. That would be a pretty valuable piece of information, wouldn't it? Here's what it is, and it's really simple. In any business, if you provide more value to your customer than anybody else does, you can't fail. It's impossible. So the trick is, first, identify your customer, make sure they're the customer you want, and make sure they're the customer that you are willing to get up and work that hard to provide more value to them than anybody else does, and you can't fail. And then the trick becomes, how do I do that? And there really are so many ways. One is just to have that mindset shift that I am not out here just to get the highest rate I can get from whoever wants to pay me today to move freight, that you're going to find good customers, whether they're in the beginning, maybe it is a carrier that you lease your truck to. That's not a bad model to get started, to kind of learn the truck side of things and fuel efficiency. And then when it's time to go get other customers, it might be brokers. In some segments, it might be a direct shipper. Find the customers that you want to provide value to, that you can work with, and then that should be your primary focus every day. You should be asking yourself that exact same question. What can I do to provide more value to my customer than anybody else does? And I'll tell you what, in this industry, it's not that hard because so few people have that kind of focus.
I love that as a fundamental mindset going into your business. There's nothing more important than that. Let's stay on that topic for a moment and go over some of the basics and fundamentals. What would you say if I was starting a business, if I had a small business and I was looking to grow or be more profitable? What would be my 101 fundamentals or basics going into this business? And I think definitely maybe I even wrote down know your customer and focus on providing more value to them than anybody else. Could be one of the fundamentals for sure. But what other things are included, would you say, in having the right business mindset as a carrier?
Yeah, I kind of look at that customer piece. Once we understand that, everything else is going to revolve around that. And then I move on to the next step, which is, as a business, I have a responsibility to generate a profit. Because if I serve my customers really well, but I can't profit from it, and I go out of business, I've done them the biggest disservice. So we're going to stick with that. We do this for a reason. We do it to serve a customer. We have to be profitable. And if you're going to be profitable, you have to measure it. We can't fix something, we can't improve something if we can't measure it. So the next fundamental that I really work hard on, the good news here is it's just not that difficult. You know, when people hear the word accounting, they kind of freak out. And I will tell you, for the last 30 years I've been doing this, the most common accounting system I've seen, and this number might be shocking, it is over 90% of the single truck carriers. They have no accounting system. They throw receipts and records in a box and wait till the end of the year. And I ran a tax and accounting company, so I have all the statistics on this. And sometime around April 12th, they will make a panicked phone call to their tax preparer and scream, I need an extension, and maybe take the box of stuff in then, and hopefully get their tax return done by the time the extension's over in October. And they'll do it year after year after year. Not only are they paying way too many taxes that they shouldn't be paying because their records aren't good enough to do a good, accurate tax return, but they have nothing to run their business by. It's very common in this industry to blame the carrier, the broker, the load board, whoever, because the rate just isn't high enough for me to make any money. Well, they really don't know what rate they need. And they need a higher rate than they should because of all the inefficiencies that occur because they don't track and improve numbers. So those two, if you have a good customer focus and you've got a good accounting system, it's about 95% of the game, and we could ignore the rest and you would still be in the top 3% of the industry.
If I have a system, if I'm building my business the right way, if I'm thinking about it the right way, I've identified my customer, I know who they are, I know how to service them, and I want to do a good job there. Now we're speaking of systems. So in this, I mean, there's lots of tools out there. Like, if I have a system, as a business owner, what are the key financial metrics that I should be focused on?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And here's the one I don't want people to focus on in the beginning. We'll get to this. But the reason I don't is it's because it's all anybody seems to talk about and focus on, and it's not the most important, and we don't have nearly as much control over it. Here's what you hear in the industry all the time. People brag about their gross rate. When the market was booming and, in general, van freight, $4 a mile was becoming common. There was a year there where, and here's what I heard. I heard truck owners laughing at their customers, brokers, and saying, "Oh, they offered me $3.80 a mile," and I just laughed at them and hung up. I'm just shocked at things like that. And that's the only number they seem to know. That number itself isn't even accurate. That's the load pay on that particular load. And we know you're not getting that all the time. And it doesn't account for all the miles you put on the truck that aren't in those load pays. The deadhead miles between loads, the deadhead miles back and forth to home or to the shop or wherever you take your truck. So in our accounting, we account for every mile that gets put on the truck, and we account for every dollar that comes in. Then that calculation gives you your revenue per mile. But I don't even like to start there. Where I like to start is on our two biggest costs of operation. One by far is fuel, and two is maintenance. The good news is almost everything we do, and I have been teaching fuel economy strategies for 30 plus years. I was working on fuel economy on my own trucks when fuel was 80 cents a gallon, and people thought I was insane. But to me, it was still my biggest expense. It always has been. So if we work on fuel, most of the strategies also help lower our maintenance costs. So with one focus on really understanding and improving fuel mileage in our operation, because they're all different, we have the biggest impact on our bottom line, the profit. Every time we can lower an expense, 100% of that savings goes to our bottom line. If I get a 10% bump in my revenue, only maybe 50% of it, if I'm really efficient, goes to my bottom line. So not only can I not have as much control over my revenue, it's mostly market driven. When I do get a bump there, that doesn't translate to money in my pocket. But if I can save $1 on an expense, all that dollar goes to my pocket and, paying for my lifestyle and putting food on the table.
Is it so? What am I using? Am I using a tool? How am I tracking? What's the right way to think about tracking fuel expense and maintenance? And how do I think about it as a cost and managing that in my business?
Yeah. So let's be really simple. I'm pretty practical. If somebody were sitting in their truck listening to this, if you had to grab a crayon and a napkin, I can help you calculate your fuel mileage. And if that's where you start, that's where you start. I started with a notebook and a pencil, and I calculated these kind of things on paper. And then I graduated in the late 80s to computers and spreadsheets. And I started writing spreadsheets. But if somebody wants to do it on paper, I would encourage them to do it. It's not that hard, and you get a good understanding of the numbers. Over the years, I graduated my spreadsheets to using QuickBooks when it first came out in the early 90s, and my spreadsheets. And then I saw the power of QuickBooks, but QuickBooks had some big flaws. To this day, I still use QuickBooks to run my current business, and I've been a user since it came out. But with a truck, there is no way to make QuickBooks calculate cost per mile or revenue per mile. And that's a big hole. Now, if you understand spreadsheets, you can export your numbers out of QuickBooks into a spreadsheet. Pretty labor intensive. Writing spreadsheets is a lot of work. So after years of using a combination of QuickBooks and spreadsheets to get the reports I wanted, I wrote an accounting software program. It's been out pretty close to 15 years now, 14 years maybe, which is really powerful and really simple. Much, much easier to use than QuickBooks, way easier to use than spreadsheets. And we don't have to export and import. And we just takes for a one truck owner, it takes 20 to 30 minutes a month to enter their data and their numbers. And they get a one-page business report that tells me everything I need to know about their business. Profit gauges.
Okay, so profit gauges. If I get profit gauges, I can keep track of my fuel, maintenance, all the other expenses in one place. Will it give me an idea if I'm making money and how much money I'm making or where my business is at on a month-to-month basis?
It does. I did something I consider pretty unique. I looked at a lot of software for accounting before I built mine and while I was building it. And I learned from QuickBooks. And you know how we all use the phrase, the bottom line? You know where that comes from? It comes from a profit and loss statement or a business report, because we start at the top with our revenue and we list all our expenses and we start to deduct our expenses from our revenue and we get to income and it's on the bottom line. So the bottom line became that really important thing. What's the bottom line? But what we were talking about is the numbers in a business. And I thought to myself, well, if it's so important, why don't we put it at the top? And I guess it was just a bunch of math geeks who just followed, math formulas where you list and then you subtract. And I said, well, that's great. But with a computer and a program, I can do all that. But I took the bottom line and put it up on the top. So when you look at our business report, the first line across the top says, here's how much gross revenue you brought in. Here's how many miles it took you to do it. Here's your revenue per mile. Here's your expenses per mile. And here's your profit. All on the top line, because it is really the most important thing we can look at. And that becomes my measurement of how the truck is doing. And then if I need to, I can look at all those expenses and, I can make it simple. In the beginning, focus on fuel and maintenance. Forget all the other stuff. You're going to have things in there like tolls and scales and supplies and insurance. And for some people, insurance might be a big expense, but there's not a lot we can do with that. And we only need to look at it once a year to maybe go out and shop for insurance. Stay focused on fuel and maintenance. And the program makes it so easy to do that. We show it as a gross amount per period per month. So you spent X number of dollars on fuel. We do the per mile calculation. So you're spending 43 cents per mile on fuel. And then there's another metric I like to look at, which is an expense as a percentage of income or of revenue. And the reason I do that is it's a little easier to do the math in your head. Your fuel cost to revenue might be something like 34 cents to $1.73. And it's not easy math. But when we convert something, an expense, to a percentage of revenue, what we're saying at that point is for every dollar of revenue I brought in, I spent 18 cents of it on fuel. That's much easier math when I'm just looking at things quickly. I know what's left over after fuel cost. So our report in profit gauges shows the dollar amount per mile, the dollar amount as a percentage of revenue, and then the last column is a monthly average. And all of this for all your expenses usually fits on one page. And I can take that page, if I have somebody's numbers, and I can essentially know more about their business than they do.
Do you have any examples of the companies that you worked with, where you came in and these things were absent? And can you give us an example of like what type of an impact this has had on that business?
I have my favorite. I talk about it all the time because I'm shocked by the potential of this concept being done with a real focus over about a decade. So I have somebody who had been a single truck carrier with his own authority for several years, and he was doing good. I mean, he didn't really struggle a lot. He had nice trucks and he liked trucks, and he was pretty mechanical, so he did a lot of his own work, and he was doing okay. And he came to an event that I created back in 2005. We call it the CMC, Certified Master Contractor. And we are getting ready to celebrate our 20th year of that program at MATS this year. We are now an official part of the Mid-America Truck Show. Last year was our first year as a part of the truck show, and we're back this year. So Matt is his name. His wife is also one of our employees now, so they are a very big part of our tribe. Matt was doing okay, but he didn't really have an accounting system. He just kind of did what a lot of people do. I've got money in the bank. I'm not worried about a breakdown, paying the bills at home. I'm doing fine. And he came one year, and it was a 2-day program back then. And I would stand up on stage for 12 hours a day for 2 days and just try to get everything out of my head. And I did it by myself. The last year that we did the full program, and it turned into a 5-day event, I spent 35 hours on stage, and we had, 15 or 16 other speakers and about 400 owner-operators there. Matt came back, and he came back, and he kept coming back to the event, and he kept doing everything that was in the program, everything we teach about expenses, and then we teach about revenue and building relationships and customer service and efficiency, and Matt just kept doing it. And last year, most people would say that the trucking industry was in a pretty bad place. Not as much freight as we're used to, rates not as good, a lot of people going out of business. Matt set what as far as I know, is a personal record. I've done accounting for tens of thousands of these guys. I've worked with companies that also do accounting. I know what the averages are. I have never seen anybody generate this much net revenue with one truck and one driver in a non-specialized segment. So he pulls reefer freight. The basic reefer freight is what this is. One truck, one driver, $293,000 net. And by the way, Matt doesn't mind me telling people this. Like my father, Matt had a 9th grade education, but he was smart, he's intelligent, and he was eager to learn. And he learned, and then he developed his own strategies, and he just kept at it. And, we talk about it now. His business is really the point where there's nothing else you can do. It's as profitable. I mean, you're just not going to squeeze any more profit out of that. Matt decided a long time ago he never wanted to own 2 trucks. Well, one of the things I teach, and this is a big focus at the CMC, the event coming up, is that the first thing you should absolutely do before you think about adding a second truck is make sure you know how to squeeze that kind of profit out of the first truck. Now, you don't have to hit those kinds of numbers, but if you have really built an efficient business on the expense side, and you've got good relationships and you're bringing in good revenue, you don't have to get to those kind of numbers, but you should have improved just about everything you can. If you get to that point and you want to get a second truck, I tell people that decision is about 5 times bigger than it was the decision to buy the first truck. On the first truck, we have total control. All of these things I talk about, all we have to do if we want to improve them is look in the mirror. The minute we buy that second truck, how many other businesses do you hire somebody, no matter how much background work you do on them, you don't know them all that well, and you turn them loose with, maybe a couple $100,000 worth of equipment in some cases, and you may not see or hear from them for months. It is a huge risk, and you lose control of much of this. I teach people how to maintain as much control on those subsequent trucks as possible, but you also have to understand we are in an industry where 100% turnover is just normal. We act like, it shouldn't be normal, but we act like it is. And that's big fleets. That's big fleets that can offer better wages, health insurance, retirement accounts, vacation packages, all kinds of benefits. And they go through drivers like water. And the mindset of drivers in the industry, and I love drivers, but the mindset is, you know what? If you piss me off this morning, I can have another job by this afternoon. So adding that second truck is a much, much bigger decision. And I have watched way too many good single truck owners lose their business because they added the second truck and they didn't know how.
Yeah. I love the emphasis on that. Thank you for sharing that. A great story. I can see how starting out, carrier entrepreneurs might think that more trucks equal more money, right? And apparently that's just not the case. You can be making a lot more money with one truck, and probably a lot less headache too than scaling.
That was my story in the beginning. I made all these mistakes. I did not, I did not have this knowledge by default. I attained this knowledge by making a lot of these mistakes, adding trucks thinking that was going to solve my problem when it just kept making my problem bigger. Luckily, I survived it. I have a philosophy in business now that if I'm starting a new project, a new business, whatever it might be, I want to make as many mistakes as I can, as fast as I can, but avoid the ones that put me out of business. Because it's how I learned. And it's how I've learned all these years. And I still encourage people. I have a system that eliminates almost all of the problems. You should go out and try to create some new problems and make some of your own mistakes, because you'll learn from it.
So I really like the idea of this single page financial statement about your business. Easy to understand. Yeah, that speaks to tracking things, right, and knowing where your business stands. Touch a little bit on. I'm going to go back to wearing a small owner operator hat, right? I did the work. I listened to Kevin. I'm using the tool. I have my one-page snapshot of my business. Now, give me some ideas and pointers around, like, what do I do with that information? Where do I go from here? How do I go from here to thinking about, how do I develop a business mindset of using this data and this tool to making more money and be more profitable?
So again, let's pick just one number. I like to simplify things as much as possible. If I have to pick one number on that page that's the most important, it always has been for me, it's your fuel cost per mile. So once we start tracking our fuel cost per mile, we give them a free tool to do that. The accounting is a monthly subscription, but we give, everybody can have access to our free tool, which is called Fuel Gauges. And in Fuel Gauges, all you need to do is, when you're standing at the pump and you're putting fuel in your truck, you pull out your phone, you open up our Fuel Gauges app, and you put in your odometer reading, the gallons you just pumped in, and the price. That's it. That's all the data entry it requires. It's going to calculate your fuel mileage on that last tank and your fuel cost per mile. And then over time, you'll be able to see a 30-day average, a 60-day average, a 90-day average, and a lifetime on fuel mileage and fuel cost per mile. We also show you your high and your low. And that's all from just putting in those three pieces of data, and it's free. Now, all you need to know is this a good number for my segment and what I do? And we can help you with that. And there's, that number's pretty easily accessible. The average in the industry right now is probably, at today's fuel price, the average cost per mile is going to be in the 60-cent range for fuel cost per mile. Our best operators are cutting that in half. They're in the 30-cent per mile range. I have two co-hosts on my Friday show that still own trucks and drive every day. Both of them are consistently breaking 10 miles to the gallon. And the average truck on the road now gets 6.7. Now, here's something I really like to get across. This is a perfect piece of information for your audience. This is what I've heard for 30 years. Well, I get it, but you guys pull vans and that dry freight, and you don't understand. We can't get that kind of fuel mileage. No, I do understand it, and you are correct. We're never going to get a car hauler to 10 miles to the gallon. The aerodynamics are awful. Everything about it screams this is going to be tough to get fuel mileage. The average on the car hauler traditionally has been about 4.5. So the mindset becomes, well, why bother? We just get lousy fuel mileage. That's the worst mindset you could have. You'll understand this as soon as I say it. If you're at 4.5 and I can get you 1 more mile per gallon, what does that look like percentage-wise compared to my co-hosts who are getting 10 miles to the gallon and we increase them by 1 mile per gallon? For them, it's a blip on the radar, really. It still could be a lot of money. If I can take a car hauler from 4.5 to 6, which we've done many times at today's fuel price, it's more than $15,000 a year in their pocket. And it's not that hard to do. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Everybody hates my first piece of advice. Fuel mileage is all about physics. We have the physics of overcoming wind resistance. We have the physics of overcoming rolling resistance, the wheels against the road, the tires against the road. We have the physics of mechanical resistance through the engine and the driveline. All the moving parts of the engine are friction. All the moving parts in the driveline are friction. We have to overcome all of these physics. Now, this is the part everybody hates. The single biggest way to make a huge improvement in the physics is just slow down. And we've developed this mindset in the industry. I get paid by the mile. The way to make more money is to drive faster. That doesn't even always work on the gross revenue side. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on this, but this is the kind of stuff we talk about. If you want to drive 75 miles an hour all day, which is what a lot of these guys try to do, if we take your top speed of 75 and we calculate your average speed for the day or the week, there's going to be a significant differential there. If we slow down to 55, which I've talked about and I've coached people to do, our average does not drop that much. The average speed and my top speed, the differential is much, much smaller. So it's not like people will look at that and they'll do the math and they'll go, wait a minute, 20 miles an hour slower and I drive 10 hours a day? You want me to lose 200 miles, but you don't lose 200 miles. It never works out that way. And then the other factor is, it's not like you get to a place and you're unloaded and loaded in minutes and back on the road again. Many times you get to a place and you've got to wait for something. And what do most drivers do when they're waiting? They idle their truck, wasting fuel. So if I can convince anybody of anything, it's slow down and learn to manage your time better. It's not hard. The money will start rolling in. That 1.5 miles per gallon gain that we talked about, the $15,000 increase, comes from slowing down 10 to 15 miles an hour over your top speed now. That's it. I don't have to teach you anything else. And I have 150 other strategies on fuel mileage, modifying the trucks, all kinds of things, driver behavior. But if you just learn that, especially as a car hauler, because the worse your aerodynamics are, the more important it is to slow down.
Yep. Thank you for sharing that. I want to take a look forward for the business. We've talked about tracking your financial metrics, developing a business mindset, knowing who you are, being intentional about your fuel consumption and treating your customers. Touch a little bit about the side of the business mindset that's forward-looking, around planning, there are a lot of inevitable events, like fuel cost is one, but also maintenance or other incidents. What's the business mindset around planning for the future?
You know, this might surprise a lot of people. I'm not a big planner. I write things down and I do set goals. And if I could impart one piece of knowledge here, it's develop a habit of setting goals and writing them down. And the reason I do it is because I don't like routine. I don't like a lot of planning. I don't like a lot of structure. It's just my personality. I like to kind of wing it most of the time. I like to take things as they come. But I realized in business that that's not always the best strategy. So if I just take some time, once a month, whenever it might be, sometimes you don't even have to do it that often, once a quarter, sit down and just write some goals. You know, I'd like to improve my fuel mileage by 0.5 of a mile per gallon in the next 3 months. Write it down, kind of forget about it. You know, I'm going to try to lower my maintenance cost by 10%, this year. Write it down. You can check in on it once in a while, but I don't really focus on the future a lot. You know, I get it down on paper where I'd like to go. I've got the numbers to track it. And then I really like to get back to that. Let me just focus on the business today. Like you said, all business is unpredictable. The trucking business is wildly unpredictable. I'd like to live in the moment and know that I've done the plan earlier. I've been proactive in building relationships with my customers and getting my costs down nice and tight. Now I can work in the moment where I'm not thinking about the past, I'm not thinking about the future. And when something comes up that I wasn't able to be proactive about because we're surprised, I'm in the moment to react in a much better way.
Yeah. Thank you. I want to take maybe just a quick second to touch on the health and nutritional aspect of your work. So can you give us a little bit of a background, like what's that about? Like it doesn't initially doesn't fit with the theme, but the way you talk about it kind of fits in. So I'm curious how they came about.
So because we built up a lot of trust with our tribe, we helped them with their business, we helped them with their money, their taxes and accounting. I was a certified financial planner. I still am. I just don't pay for the license, and I don't use the initials. We built a lot of trust around that. And driver health has been deteriorating for decades, like the health of most Americans. And our tribe started coming to me saying, you should help us with our health. And I said, well, why would I do that? I do money and business and retirement accounts. And they said, well, but you always tell stories and you wrestled your whole life and you owned a gym and you coached wrestling and you look fit and healthy. And I said, well, yeah, but that doesn't qualify me to help somebody else be healthy. And they said, but nobody's helping us and what they tell us doesn't work. And I just kept putting it off. And I had an employee who really started to kind of hound me about it. And weekly, she would say, Kevin, you got to help these guys. And I would say, I'm not qualified. We don't do that. I don't want to lose our focus. And after about a year, she made one statement. It was a quote she read to me, and it changed everything. And the quote was that a healthy person has hundreds of wishes and a sick person only has one. And it hit me so hard that why am I doing all of this to help them be more financially healthy? And then so many of them get sick and none of it matters. And that's really life for all of us. I think of somebody like Steve Jobs, who died of cancer. I'm older than he was when he died now. And I think he had built such a wonderful life. He had helped so many people. But because of health, he's gone. So I said, all right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to do what I'm good at. I'm good at taking a lot of complicated information and learning it in a way that I can teach it to other people easily. And I said, I guess I'll do that with health. And I gave myself a year. I said, I'm going to read the top 100 new books on health. And I think then I'll be able to help people. And I got through 100 books in about 7 months, I think. And I went back to school and became a nutritional therapy practitioner. And that was 10 years ago. And now health is about 80% of our business.
What does that look like? Do people just reach out to you? Do you offer your services? Like what if I came to you as a client, what would that look like?
The first thing we offer is what I learned in all those books is that forget genetics. Genetics has almost nothing to do with our health. Forget prescription drugs and doctors and the healthcare system. It really is a sick care system, and it's built for nothing but profit. And what the beauty of our incredibly complicated body is that the owner's manual should be one page. And if we eat real whole food, and what I mean by that is food that doesn't have an ingredient list. So if I have to read the label to find out what the ingredients are, well, right off the bat, it's not real whole food the way it exists in nature. Beef has no ingredient list. Eggs have no ingredient list. I'm big on the carnivore and keto diet because we've been doing it for 10 years. We've helped a lot of people. I've been eating keto and carnivore for 10 years myself, and I very seldom stray. I don't eat a lot of vegetables. I don't eat any grains. I eat some fruit, some honey, some dark chocolate, mostly animal products, and it works fantastic. We just teach them those simple basics. We don't even charge for that. I answer those questions every day. Wednesdays on my show is all health for 3 hours. I do group coaching if people need to go deeper. We have courses in our tribe site that cover all of this. But more important, we help them control their own food supply. Because the problem on the road is it is a horrible lifestyle, and it's like a food desert everywhere you go. We teach drivers how to pressure can meat so that it becomes shelf stable. They can take, pints and quarts of meat with them in the truck that doesn't need refrigeration, and they can take enough to last a month. We do teach them how to ferment vegetables, and then they become shelf stable as well. They don't need refrigeration. So we don't do a lot of that, but fermenting foods has health benefits. And then for convenience, we have shopped the market for the last 10 years, and we have a pretty active store where they can buy really high quality canned seafood, which, tuna, salmon, mackerel, sardines, anchovies in a can. Those are like superfoods. We have grass-fed beef in pouches. We do have snack foods, some sweet stuff. We don't expect everybody to eat perfect all the time, but everything in our store, there are none of those sketchy ingredients we're starting to hear about. We've been telling people to avoid seed oils for 10 years. Now, all of a sudden, it's a presidential debate topic, which is wonderful. I'm glad that it is. But we helped people eliminate all the garbage out of their diet years ago, and then we make it really convenient because they can buy it through our store. And that really is a big part of our revenue. And we encourage people to buy there because most everything else we do, we give away. A lot of our education, our information, we answer questions, and we support it through that store.
Thanks for sharing that. Tell us where we can find this stuff. Like if any, first of all, I'm super. I told you in the beginning, I'm very excited to have you on the show and to introduce you to at least parts of the car hauling community who may not have heard about you. So if we want to find your content or follow your work, or maybe engage with you as a coach, or get access to the nutritional products we have, where would we go for all of that?
Yeah, so there's two sites, our store and our company site. That all of this site is open to the public, is letstruck.com. You can order all the products there. We have resources. I have there's some blog posts, there's protocols for health, all free other than the store. And then we have what is really becoming the hub of everything we do, and that is our community site. And it's built like a social site. So just like you would have a profile on Facebook and you can scroll the news feed and you can post things and reply, our site does all of that. We make it a member site, and we charge an entire $3 a month. And we do that because we can keep out the trolls. Once somebody has to give us a credit card to get in, if we have to kick them out, and we used to have to kick people out all the time, you know how trolls are, they can't just get another email address and come back. They'd have to get another credit card to come back. And some have. And after we burn through 3 or 4 of their credit cards with different names, then they can't come back anymore. So once we instituted the $3 a month, all of our trolls went away. We have none of that now. So it's a community. We have live video channels in there. I do a thing twice a week called Coffee with Kevin. I just fire up the video camera and I just start ranting about whatever's on my mind that morning. And we're growing those. We have pro channels where our partners, companies like Pittsburgh Power, one of the premier maintenance shops in the country, does live video demonstrations of how to fix trucks. We troubleshoot trucks over the video and over the radio. So everything that we're doing now, and more we're moving everything into that site. And that site is letstrucktribe.com.
Thanks for sharing that. Hey, thank you so much for being on the show, Kevin. It was great. I took a lot of notes for myself as well as to follow up and do some more research and look at your content. Do you have any parting thoughts, advice, any feedback, anything you'd like to share with the car hauling community?
Yeah, I know the kind of reaction I get when I talk about things like this. Slow down, stop calling your customers jerks, track your numbers. Especially with a lot of the old school guys, my generation of drivers, there's a lot of resistance to those ideas. And I get it. It's a different culture. My biggest piece of advice would be if you found this shocking or you just completely disagree with it, keep an open mind. Take a day off or a weekend off. Go someplace you really enjoy. Just think about it. Maybe write down some ideas. And if you disagree with all this stuff and you're living your best life already, well, then just ignore me.
Great. Love it. Thank you so much, Kevin. Appreciate your time. It was great to have you on the show.
Yeah, I had fun. Thanks.
Yeah, and that's a wrap. I know we could keep going, but I didn't want to turn into a 3-hour charade.
Yeah. I told you, if we got through that material in 45 minutes, we would have been doing good.
It's pretty good. You've dialed in a lot of your work into very actionable items that can be communicated in a simpler terms. I love that. I mean, financial literacy is a big problem in my customers as well.
Yeah.
I see a lot of owner-operators come and go into the industry.
It's a shame because I know very few groups that work as hard as they do. Their normal week is 60 hours and they don't get home very often. There's a lot of sacrifice and they should get paid better for what they do. And it's really in their control.
Hey, it just came to mind. Do you think you might be interested at some point to do a financial literacy webinar for car haulers? I think that could be something interesting. I mean, you have a lot of the content, right? Big chunk of our customers are small businesses, under 10 trucks.
We do a lot of that.
Operators.
We're in the middle of a 6-month webinar series with truckstop.com right now. And we deliver one webinar a month over a 6-month period. And it's all geared towards the stuff we just talked about, just spreading it out over 6 months so we can spend a little more time on each one. But even then, we do a 45-minute webinar and try to leave 15 minutes for questions. And it's hard to get much information out. So we try to pick just one topic each month to talk about it. But I do a lot of that kind of stuff. Truck Stop is covering all of that. So we've got them on an entire package for the year. So they sponsor our CMC at Matt's. They're a monthly part of everything we do, and the webinar was one we threw in. So typically, our partner companies pay $2,000 to $3,000 a month, depending on the package, and then we do all kinds of creative things like this. It's all built around education. That's really what we bring. So, being a part of our radio show, being a part of our community, we are now building what we're calling pro channels for our partners. So Truck Stop will have their own site within our site with their own live stream capability. Pittsburgh Power, the maintenance shop, they're setting up cameras in their dyno rooms so people can watch them run the trucks on the dynos. So all those things that we do are just all part of those monthly packages. Sure, we'd love to work with you.